Welcome, everyone, to the final session of the Colorectal Cancer Community Conference. For this session, entitled Life After Diagnosis, Navigating the New Normal, we welcome Dr. Margaret Fitch, who is a professor at the Bloomberg Faculty of Nursing, the University of Toronto. She has a background in oncology nursing and psychosocial oncology, including palliative care, and has been practicing for over 20 years at the Odette Cancer Centre in Toronto. Dr. Fitch's long-term research focus has been on coping and adaptation of patients, survivors, and families across the full cancer trajectory. Dr. Fitch will be facilitating the session, and she will be joined by Rihanna Katz, Jody Tilley, and Ronnie Campbell, all of whom will introduce themselves as part of the session. Over to you, Dr. Fitch.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for that introduction. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon and welcome you to our panel on navigating life after cancer treatment. I'm looking forward to the insights that we're going to hear from our panel members, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Before we start, I want to say a few words just to help us set the stage for this particular session. Right now, the era that we are living in terms of cancer care is, some leaders call it a golden age. And it's because so much of the science and the evidence behind screening, behind early diagnosis and treatment has really changed the landscape for cancer care. And as a result, we're seeing more individuals who are actually living full lives beyond the cancer treatment, or are living for longer periods of time with controlled disease, or perhaps living with no clinical evidence of disease at all. And in that regard, then, they are able to share their experiences and help us learn where some of the gaps in care might be, where we might actually make improvements in the resources that are available. And I think we're going to hear some of that this afternoon. But I wanted to say a few words about the Canadian Transition Survey in which I was involved. It was run under the auspices of the Canadian Partnership Against Cancer. And we had over 13,000 survivors, individuals who were living 1 to 3 years after their treatment had finished, and from right across Canada, so all 10 provinces. And they were able to tell us about their experiences. And it was very clear that even though they had finished their treatment, there were changes. There were physical changes, emotional changes, practical changes that they had to contend with. Many were living with fatigue, with changes in thinking and memory, having challenges going back to work or thinking about making work-related or life priority changes. Some fearing recurrence and living with that uncertainty every day. And some individuals were not too distressed about the changes that had occurred to them, but others were feeling more anxiety, more distress around the changes that had occurred, and really were facing difficulties finding the kind of help that they needed. Even when they went searching, sometimes it was difficult for them to pinpoint what was most relevant and most helpful to them. Across all of the written comments we had, it was very clear that the important things for people were the access to information, knowledge about resources that were available, the support they received from family and friends in the environment, the communication they had with healthcare providers. And in that regard, I think we're going to hear a little bit more about those kinds of themes as well. So let me just say that I think this notion of living after treatment is finished and recognizing that there are challenges, that there are ways that we can help one another and that we can move on in terms of our lives is something that we need to be sharing and thinking about. So I think we're going to hear that this afternoon to some extent. We will have a conversation with our panel members, and then you will have an opportunity to respond, ask some questions, or make some comments. So let me turn to our panel members, and perhaps we can start with a question around what did you find was helpful to you? What actually made it easier for you once the treatment time had finished? So, Jody, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Fitch. The first thing I would say that made it easier after I was finished treatment is the really obvious one of the side effects and the symptoms starting to dissipate, and the physical well-being starting to return to your body. Now, that takes a lot of time. So I think that some of the things that I did, because my energy was so low during after completion of my treatment, and I continued to do some work with sort of IV therapy. I saw a naturopath, an oncological naturopath, who helped me regain some of that. So the physical stuff for me was quite challenging towards the end of my treatment, and I was so used to being so sick and dealing with multiple, like up to about 30 different side effects. So that was the clear, obvious one for me, was the physical health starting to return to my body. But also, I think it was really important to sort of then start to focus on mental health and seek out some of those psychosocial oncology supports that I didn't really know about at the time. And so I kind of just paved my own way. And now I know a lot more about them and the services that are offered. But for sure, dealing with the new normal was so tough that I knew that it was emotionally overwhelming at times. So having to see a therapist to talk about how to sort of reintegrate into the new normal was really important for me, and that was helpful.
Thank you very much for starting us off. That is helpful in terms of us beginning to think about it's not just one thing, but it's many things that have to be juggled all at the same time.
It is.
And I'm happy to see that Ronnie has been able to join us. I'm sorry you had the technical difficulties. We were just starting off with our conversation around what helped, what made it easier. So just to give you a moment to catch your breath, I'm going to turn to Ronnie and just ask her to weigh in on this part of the conversation.
Just can you do the question again? Sorry. What made it easier for me?
What made it easier?
Going through the treatments. I too had a naturopath oncologist, and he helped me quite a bit. The vitamin C's and the treatments that I did helped me to. I was a triathlete and a marathon runner, so getting back to being as close to normal when I was going through the treatments, that helped me a great deal. So with doing both conventional and naturopathic treatments, I was able to, on my off weeks, after about 8 months to a year, I was able to start, running again and start to training again, which helps you psychologically because it puts you back to that normal state. And anybody going through cancer, and when you have a stage 4 cancer, what you really want to do is you want to be normal. You want people to treat you normal, and you want to be back to the way you were before. And I know when I joined the gym, when I was going through the treatments, it was nice because nobody at the gym knew what I was going through, right? So, and they treated me like everybody else, which was something that was huge because, going through cancer, you want normalcy back in your life. I think that's a big thing, you know, so.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to talk about that notion of finding the new normal in a moment, but I want to give Rianne a chance to talk about her particular situation as a caregiver.
Mhm. Absolutely. Thank you. So, my role as a caregiver was ultimately very different compared to everybody else's, especially being at such a young age, taking on this role and responsibility of taking care of my grandfather. So, speaking for my grandfather during his time of treatment, it was especially very difficult for him. He was very anxious, very nervous, especially being an immigrant. And at the same time, he was fighting dementia too. So, he had a really hard time understanding what he was going through, what the cancer was, and how it was affecting his life on a day to day. So, in a sense, there was an emotional loss with him. He felt a sense that he lost himself in the middle of it, and he found out later on that he wasn't able to do things the way that he used to. He was always a man that loved, getting up every single day. He would always be so active, going on walks, taking care of the family, taking care of myself. So he would always take on that responsibility, whereas this time the roles kind of reversed, where he was in need of help and our family and myself had to help him with that. So for me in particular, it was very emotionally draining just to stay strong, not only for him, but for my family as well. And at the same time, I was doing caregiving from a distance. So I'm in school right now at Windsor. And so the caregiving was a little bit more difficult from a distance, but thankfully, with my close family members, I had them taking on that role. So we both had to adjust to our new version of life, one where we both knew that his energy was limited, and over time, our energy, being as a caregiver, was going to be limited as well, knowing that his independence was slowly fading. Although it wasn't easy, my being a caregiver and being in the summertime as well, it was difficult finding a new norm as to what normal students would do during the summers, go out, enjoy the summer vacation, whereas my life was a little bit more different, taking on this role and responsibility. But in the end, we found strength in each other. We leaned and relied on a lot of family, prayer, and moments of peace just to keep going.
Thank you very much. It's been clear to me over the years that cancer is really a family disease. It's not just about the individual who is diagnosed with the disease, but it's for the whole family to be coping with the situation. You've all talked about this notion of finding the new normal. And I've heard that from other individuals that after treatment, there is that recovery time, that time of adjusting to what is happening. But can you talk a little bit about what you found most challenging when it came to finding that new place, that new space for yourselves? Jody, do you want to
Yeah,
set
sure.
us up?
Yeah, for me, from the time of diagnosis till I finished treatment, it was about 9 months, and so you just get very reliant on a team of people that are always checking in with you. You've got appointments. It becomes a full-time job to survive cancer, and when you're not doing chemotherapy, you're doing IV treatments, or you're doing hydration injections, or you're doing blood tests, or you're doing scans, or you're trying to spend time with your family, it was very challenging for me when I finished, because all of this structure went away, and now your friends and your family kind of expect, okay, you're good now, you're done, let's go back to life as it was. But life as it was as a cancer survivor is non-existent. That's a thing of the past, and I definitely suffered from a lot of fear of recurrence, as you mentioned, and I still suffer from that. And I don't know if that ever fully goes away, but I think time helps. And the further you get away from your diagnosis and completing treatment, the easier it becomes. But a lot of the challenging things that I experienced as well was just, you mentioned it, Dr. Fitch, that it's a family disease. And I had 2 6-year-old children at the time of my diagnosis. And during that period of treatment over a course of 9 months, there was a lot of behavioral issues going on. And I had a child start having anxiety attacks and panic attacks anytime he couldn't see everyone in his family. So we could be in the same house, but if he didn't know where everyone was, he'd start having a panic attack. He didn't want to leave the house. He didn't want to go into public spaces. He had this huge fear of abandonment and scared that he was going to lose his family. And, they were only 6 years old and didn't really have a lot of understanding of what cancer was, but they went from seeing their mother that was super active to their mother that couldn't get out of bed and, spent a lot of time very, very ill and going to bed at 5 o'clock at night and vomiting. And I mean, I dealt with every side effect you could probably imagine. And that was very tough for my children. My husband still had to work and he still had to take care of things. And there was a lot of stress and pressure put upon him during my treatment for obvious reasons that, I was very sick and I had an advanced diagnosis. And so there was a lot of fear for him. But also now he's taking on a lot more responsibility of trying to run the household, which was, I did all the cooking and shopping and laundry, and he's having to take this on work. But also just taking care of the kids was such a big part of his fear and responsibility. So that was very, very challenging. Now you're done treatment, and you're having to deal, because when you're in treatment, it's just about I need to survive, and I don't have a lot to give outside of that. So now you're done, and everyone puts this expectation on you that, well, you can get back to cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids and doing the groceries and back to work you go. And it's a really weird time and stressful time while you're also trying to figure out, but I just survived cancer, so now I've got to like rehabilitate and get what we call this new normal. For me was very different than my previous normal because I was a very, very social person, and I'd go out with my girlfriends and I'd drink a couple of glasses of wine every night, and I ate what I thought was healthy, but now I'm reevaluating everything that I put into my body, that my kids put into their body, and I'm going hardcore paranoid with everything has to be organic, and we're not eating processed food, and there's no more preserved meats coming into our house. And so you're dealing with it. Your world has been turned upside down, and now you're trying to recreate it so that you live and your children live, and you're taking on so much that it becomes so emotional and so overwhelming, and you need to have coping mechanisms, because if you don't, you could just continue to spiral down. And so that for me was the most challenging. And we already talked about the things and what the good things were and what you could do, what made it easier. And there was some of those things we already talked about, but you really have to focus on those things, because the challenging part of recovery can completely overwhelm you if you don't prioritize and have boundaries on what you can and can't do.
Thank you very much. You've covered a lot of territory, and there's so many different questions that I want to ask, but I want to give Rihanna an opportunity to talk about the caregiver perspective, and then we'll hear from Ronnie again.
Absolutely. So, in the beginning stages, my grandfather underwent radiation treatment. After his treatment was finished, we noticed that he was still in a lot of pain. He endured a lot of fatigue. And as a family and himself the looming fear of that the cancer was going to spread throughout the entire body, as he didn't want to go through the stage of getting a surgery to remove the tumor. For me personally, it was more watching someone that I love silently fighting this disease every single day. And I think later on, during his time of treatment and him being with us, we underwent palliative care team. So we had a team of members coming every single day to provide us with medications, give us updates on how he's doing, make sure that he's doing okay. And after my grandfather's death, for me personally, it was a tremendous change that I had to encounter. It was something that I've never experienced before. Being at home for those 2 weeks that I took on the role of really being the primary caregiver. I was sleeping downstairs on the couch. We had a hospital bed in our living room. I would sleep on the couch. I was sacrificing a lot of my sleep, my own mental health, my own physical well-being to make sure that I was taking care of him, because with his limitations, he needed someone there to help him. Of course, we had my other family members around helping us as well, but I wanted to take on that main caregiving role. So again, sacrificing a lot of sleep, a lot of time taking care of myself, at the same time managing my time with being a full-time student throughout the summertime, as well as a part-time position. It was a lot to balance. After the passing of my grandfather, I still take on this caregiving role to this day. The new norm of adjusting to life post caregiving, it took a lot of time building back that schedule again, of finding those habits, those sleeping habits again. At night I would sleep, and then if I heard a little thing, I would wake up thinking, oh, maybe it's my grandfather. He needs something again, because that's how I would respond to him back home. So my transition from his passing all the way back to when I started school was very limited. It was only a week and a half that I had to readjust to this new norm. So it was definitely challenging. And to this day, I still take on that caregiving role, specifically to my grandmother now, who is a widow. I ensure that she's okay. I take on the responsibility of her appointments, making appointments for her, making sure that she has the proper medications for her health, for her own safety, and just ensuring that she's okay, taking on that same exact role that I did with my grandfather. So although it was a big adjustment that I had to make, I still find that I am doing that caregiving role throughout the rest of my family members.
Thank you very much. It's fascinating for me, if I speak from my researcher point of view and my awareness of what's in the literature, the impact on the caregivers and the kind of ongoing impact is really just beginning to emerge in the literature in a way for us to start understanding. But let me turn back to then the person who was diagnosed with the disease. Ronnie, do you want to talk a little bit about what you found most challenging in achieving that so-called new normal?
Yeah, I'm 5 years cancer free, and I was considered palliative. It was all over my insides. I had several organs that were covered in cancer. And I still, to this day, I get a CAT scan every 6 months. And, I'm still check all the blood work. I, wait for that CAT scan. I still get worried, just like everybody that's had their first CAT scan does. And I, like Jody, the way you eat, your body's a temple, and what you put in your body is so important. And that's why, for me, as a nutritionist, I, make, I actually put together a sheet or a document to give to people, because a lot of people reach out to me because they want to talk to someone that has had stage 4 and, only 6 months to live. They want to reach out and, what's that magic potion? But there is no magic potion. But yeah, I get just as scared. I worry. I, pay attention to everything I eat. And like Jody, I, like my wine, when I had company over. Now it's one of those things you have on a special occasion, and not very often. So it's just everything changes. And, if I don't feel well, my big thing is, oh, is it back? And because I had it in so many organs in my body, that it had spread to, I know if it does come back, I probably it won't be a good outcome. So I worry about that all the time. It's always on my shoulder. It's one of the things my naturopath said to me, when I was done the treatments, and I still did the IVs and the hypothermia 2 years after I was cancer free, just to make sure that I got it all. But he said, you can never go back to the way you were before. So I think about that all the time. And even on days where I don't feel like swimming or running or cycling, I get up and I do it anyways, because first of all, I think of when I was sick and I wasn't able to do it. And then I think, nope, I got to make sure I keep it up, because I don't want to get sick again. So I worry about that all the time. I worry about what I eat, my fitness level, and I monitor everything. I monitor my blood pressure. I monitor my breathing. I monitor my lung capacity. Am I in ketosis? So I'm more anal now than I used to be. And I try to, help people as much as I can and give them information. I reached out to the schools, to talk to students about the nutrition, and I did it for the simple reason that, what you eat now and how you treat your body now is going to affect you in the years coming, right? So if we can get people to start eating healthy now, get rid of the processed foods, be organic, make sure that you limit your sugar, or, try to eliminate it totally from your body. And that's hard to do. But that's where, for me, my big thing is trying to get people. And, that's why I made this document. I actually took it to the cancer clinic. And it's just on, the different diets that will help cancer patients. And it's not really diets, it's just nutrition plans, whether it's keto, Mediterranean, plant-based, low sugar, low glycemic. And I also talked about hydration. Hydration is also very, very important. And I, like Jody, I had to have that hydration. My chemo was for 3 days, and then I had hydration for 3 days after. And it's just because, as much as I love my water and I drink all I can, when I was going through chemo, and if you are going through chemo, nothing tastes good. And you can love your water, but it doesn't taste the same. Nothing tastes the same. And people, unless you're going through it or have been through it, you don't understand. So that's where hydration is really important. So I put that in my document too, for people to understand that it's not just nutrition, it's hydration, and exercise too, whether you walk around the block or, just getting yourself just some movement, I think is very important. So that's my goal now, is to help as many people as I can, and to take what I've learned and to try to pass it on, because I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through this. And I think, Jody, you probably feel the same way. Once you've done it, you wouldn't want anybody to have to go through it. So if you can help just one person change their eating habits, or change the way they treat their body, it's worth it, right? So, I think that's what it was. When I got cancer, I think it was God's way of slowing me down and putting everything in perspective. And you know what? Now you've got a second chance at life, and mine now is paying it forward.
Thank you very much. Again, you've covered a lot of topics in your conversation. And one of the things that runs through my mind is that notion of moving into an experience. It's a new experience for you, but when you think back, each of you, if you look at the beginning of that experience, is there something that you wish you had known, wish you had been told, primarily by the healthcare professionals or perhaps by peers or other cancer patients or caregivers? Is there something that you wish you had known at the beginning? Jody, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I think everybody is so focused on your physical health, but nobody talks about your mental health. And I wish I'd known more to focus on that a little bit, I think, from the start. But also, one of the other things I wish I'd realized or been informed about or knew about is all this psychosocial support for your family members, because we keep bringing this up, that it's a family disease, and you're focused on you, your doctors are focused on you, and your medical team is, but nobody's focused on your husband and kids. And in my situation, having a very young family, that wasn't something that even really occurred to me until, my kids started having anxiety attacks and panic attacks. And even then, I didn't really know what support there was for him other than, privately paying for a therapist to talk to him. And so I wish I'd known more about that. I think the psychosocial support services weren't clearly defined to me. And I also, my diagnosis was in an emergency room after a 3-day bowel obstruction. So it was there was no time to really process, here's what's going to happen. It was, you have cancer, you're going into the emergency room operating theater right now because your bowel is about to rupture, and then we'll have a bigger problem if that happens. And then I woke up and, I'd had my surgery, and they're like, okay, we sent your lymph nodes off to pathology, and a few days later it came back, yes, you're metastatic, you're 3B, we're going to start you on chemo as soon as you get out of the hospital, basically, and heal. And so it was just like, drinking out of a fire hose, but there was not really enough time or explanation or education or support given to me in those beginning stages about, let's focus as well on your mental health, because this is going to be the toughest thing that you've ever had to go through. I was so focused on, I have to live for my kids. And it was about me surviving to be their mother. And there was just not really much discussion or like I said, educational support around the things that you should also be focusing on: mental health, family support. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Brienne, what about from the caregiver's point of view?
Absolutely. One thing I wish I had known was how emotionally heavy caregiving would be, especially being a younger individual and balancing the life of school as well. Not just the physical task, but of course the task of, silently watching someone that you love fade away before your eyes. I thought being strong meant holding it all in, but I've learned that strength can also mean letting yourself be free, grieve, and to be asking others for help. Like we mentioned in our last conversation, I wish I knew that caregiving doesn't end after treatment ends. Like I mentioned, how I'm still taking on that caregiver role, that there's still an entire chapter afterwards where you feel uncertainty, emotional wounds, and the pressure that, to keep life going as if everything is normal and that nothing feels normal at all. The main thing I think for me was I wish I had known that it's okay to not have all the answers as a caregiver. No one gives you a manual on how to become a caregiver, what's to be expected. There's no answers to it. And there's no perfect way of being a caregiver. Sometimes there's just things that make it better, just, sitting there in silence, holding their hand, listening to, their stories, their challenges, things that make them happy is more than enough, especially as being a caregiver. And overall, I think the main thing was wishing I had known more of the love that I gave, the sacrifices that I made for my grandfather and for my family, as well as the quiet moments that I did share with him, would be the most sacred part of my life. That even though it was extremely difficult, it was extremely exhausting and heartbreaking at the same time, that those were the moments that shaped me as a person and why I'm here today, that deepened my purpose a lot more and showed me truly what unconditional love looks like.
Thank you very much. Let's just turn to Ronnie for a few moments. What did you, thinking back, wish you had known at the beginning?
Again, like Jody said, it was more education, just more information, of what was going to happen. Because I think until you go through cancer, and you have no idea. And I've learned so much about cancer and nutrition, and just how it's not just the cancer, it's the full circle. It's your spiritual, it's your psychological, it's all of that. It's there's a lot. And with your family too, there's a lot of things that change, even with your family. So yeah, it really does put things in perspective. It really does. For me, it slowed me down, and it really made me realize how important life is, how quickly things can change in a heartbeat. And just when you think you've got things all figured out, you don't, but that's one of the things that it can change. And I just I wish I knew more about the support systems that are out there. I've learned more in the last couple of years. I put on National Cancer Survivor Day here in Brantford. So I've, had worked with a lot of organizations that I had no idea that were out there. And that's where, for me, to put them out there for anybody going through cancer, especially if they've just been diagnosed, to let them know what's out there. Because they're, when you go and you meet your oncologist, I just wished that they had something more to give you, and more information, or if they could say, yep, you have cancer, and you need to speak to this person, and that person sits you down, because it's very overwhelming. Sits you down and says, okay, here's the organizations that are out there that can help you, because there's a lot of good organizations out there, that can help people, that I don't think people know about. I mean, I'm just finding out about it now, and that's where, that's why I keep saying to them, oh my God, the cancer clinic needs to spread this word, about it. So that's one of the things, the support that's out there, because there is a lot.
Well, you've almost anticipated my last question. I was going to ask each one of you if you had two pieces of advice for others, other patients or other caregivers. We just have a few minutes left in our time together before we open for questions. And I would ask if you might just think about, what are the two pieces of advice that you might share with others in terms of helping them cope, helping them navigate this challenging time? Rianne, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. Um, so my main piece of advice, especially for the caregiving role, is to take your time. There's really no right way to heal or to adjust being a caregiver during treatment, post treatment. Ultimately, to be patient with yourself and with people around you, because you are all a team and you're all fighting through this together. Ask for help when you need it. That was something that I was truly embarrassed about in the beginning, of my process of grieving. I was afraid to ask for help. I was afraid to talk to counselors, to seek guidance on how I can heal, how I can properly grieve. And the one thing is, whether you're a survivor, you're a caregiver, your emotions are valid. Your stories are what matters, and what's being being heard, so that other members like myself are interested to learn more about you, learn more about your stories, and we want to promote it. We want to help you out. Just finding something to hold on to, whether that's faith, purpose, family, or a dream. Let it help guide you. Let it be that reason why you continue fighting on. and to know that you're not alone. There are people out there like myself, younger caregivers that I know of, other people as well taking on that caregiver role, that there's strength in the community and there's hope in every step moving forward.
Thank you very much. Many words of wisdom there.
Mhm.
Jody, do you want to follow along?
Yeah, I think you have to give yourself so much grace because you're not the same person when you go through cancer. When you're on the other side and you're finished treatment, I feel like a completely different person with different priorities, different perspectives. And I think that you really just have to speak up for what you need. And when you surround yourself with uplifting people, I mean, something as simple as that, like don't give away your energy to people that are going to drag you down. And I certainly definitely had more boundaries and I think it's important to really ask for what you need and say no when you have to say no, because people will have this, I mentioned it before, their expectations of you returning to normal. And I had a lot of friends going, great, when are we going out to dinner? When are we going drinking? When are we doing this? And when are we going out for wine? And I'm not that person anymore. So I felt like it's okay to redefine what health means to you. And the ones who respect that will stand by your side, and the ones who don't and miss their wine girlfriend, well, that's okay. It's okay because you have to really define what success, happiness, and health looks like for you after cancer. And if those people don't fit into your life, it's okay to say no, and it's okay to have your boundaries because you have to be your priority. And so that's my advice. I think, healing is definitely not about looking back at everything. It's about moving forward. And when you can do that with courage and clarity, then I think that you're on the right path.
Thanks very much. We're getting a wonderfully long list of strategies that people could embrace, the ones that work for them. And Ronnie, we have a few minutes left, just a very few minutes. Do you want to round up this question response?
Yeah, I would just tell them, when you have cancer, if you're tired or if you're not feeling well, you have to look after yourself. You have to be an advocate. If you don't like what's happening or, you think something else is wrong, you have to be an advocate. You have to speak up. And yeah, you have to set your boundaries. I believe that totally, Jody. And after cancer, you will not be the person you were before. It just changes you. I think, like I said, I think it puts things in perspective. Um, to me, it was a reality check. And so it did. It put things in perspective. You don't sweat the small stuff. You hug more. You say, I love you more, because you never know.
Thank you very much. I think that we have certainly heard a range of experiences this afternoon and a range of advice or suggestions for strategies or ways of coping with the new normal. And even though some of us have said that we're not really happy with new normal, that it's different than it ever was, the idea of trying to find a place that's comfortable, a space that's comfortable, and moving forward is clearly the message I'm hearing from everyone's conversation. Are there any last words? We have 2 minutes before our question period opens. Any last one or two sentences that each of you would like to say? Rianne?
Um, for me personally, it's more towards the caregiving, especially the younger caregivers, that share your story as much as you can, reach out as much as you can. We hear you, the caregiving community. We see you, and we're here to support you as much as we can.
Jody?
Yeah, I think, there's such a a perspective shift, and Ronnie just mentioned it, but you definitely don't sweat the small stuff as much. And, you know, I don't scream at my husband as much when he leaves a wet towel on the floor anymore. And you reprioritize what's important. And I think that one of the silver linings for me having survived cancer is that I live with a lot more intention and purpose now. And I think that that's a blessing that I got from this, and being able to, you know, I definitely feel more of a responsibility now to advocate, educate, and support people, because it's a very isolating journey. And so if you can be a support person for someone else, and like Ronnie said, even just one person, I know I went very public with my journey, and I feel that, you know, that responsibility to do so, to help prevent this from someone else having to go through this.
Thank you. And Ronnie.
Yes, I agree with what Jody said. Just being there to support people, that is my goal, you know. And if anybody has any questions, or, you know, try to reach out to a peer person, someone that's been there. It just gives you that little bit of validation, that, you know what, you have the strength to do this. You can fight this. So, and just knowing the support is there. So that's all.
Thank you. And just as we count down to the last of our time as a panel, I want to say officially thank you to each one of you for sharing your insights. I think they will be most helpful to our audience members. And now it's time to open the lines, do they say? Open the opportunity for questions from our audience members.
Thank you again to everyone who's been submitting questions. Dr. Fitch, Rihanna, Jody, and Ronnie are all here to answer the many questions that you have. And I'm going to start with the first one, which is, what do you do to manage fear of recurrence? And I think this is a question that, from their own perspective, each of our panel members could answer. So I'm going to ask Dr. Fitch to start us off on this one.
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. I appreciate the question. I think it's an important one. And perhaps the first thing I'll say is that it is a common emotional reaction that people will have after having been through such an intense experience of being diagnosed, being treated, going through the treatment experience. It's not unusual at all to experience fear of what's going to happen in the future, of the recurrence of the disease. I think it's important to recognize, though, that there's wide variation in how frequently people think about it, how much it might interfere, how much it becomes a distressing issue for people. And of course, people react and manage in their own way. I think if it becomes intense enough, then there are programs and there are individuals on the team, healthcare team, who can assist people. So perhaps it will be helpful to hear from Jody or Ronnie or Rihanna about what they did to manage this.
That would be terrific. And I really like your point about, you know, that scale of intensity. Is it a little bit or is it a lot? And when perhaps is it, who do you need to check in when? Jody, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. Really good point, I think, Dr. Fitch, because as I approach, what's the date? In 5 days, I will be 3 years since completing treatment and ringing the bell. And these days, my fear of recurrence is a lot less than what it was when I first finished treatment. I still do have that fear, because I'm coming up on the 3rd year, and I'm due for another scan. And so as the date gets closer, I start to feel the anxiety and the pressure of that. But in the beginning, when it was quite acute fear of recurrence, I think there were a few different strategies that I employed. And one of them I did a lot was journaling, just writing down how I felt and kind of being mindful and speaking. I did speak with a therapist quite often to help me figure out those feelings and where to put my energy. So that was really good for me as well. I think just being out in nature was a really good way to sit with my thoughts. And we're so busy with work and life and being all the things to all the people that I often would sort of have some boundaries and let everyone know that I needed some time, and I would get as close to nature as I could. And whether that was, a hike in the mountains or a big walk out on my own in a big park, and I made sure that I had time for that every day. And then the journaling and speaking to a therapist was really good for me. I also listened to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of books to manage my anxiety and fear around that. But these days, I think it's much more manageable than it used to be. But I feel for the people that are coming out of treatment, because it can be debilitating at times and get quite overwhelming. And surrounding yourself with the right people is also really, really important, because you need to have that positive energy around. And people that don't bring that positive energy, and you can feel a bit suffocated at times. So for sure, that was a big part of it for me as well.
Thank you for sharing that. Ronnie, did you want to add?
Yeah, with what I found is, well, when I left my naturopath, one of the things he said was, your life has changed now, and you need to, if you don't want your cancer to come back, you need to make sure that you stay with the changes. So with mine, I took my eating up a notch, and I exercise every day. And it's just one of those things that even when you don't feel like exercising or going for that walk or that run or that bike ride, you do it, because there was times when you couldn't do it, and I never want to slip back to get to that cancer diagnosis again. And the other thing that Jody said is, when I do my CAT scans, like everybody, the closer you get to your CAT scan day, the more you start to have a little bit of anxiety. And then once you get the results, and everything is still at bay, then it's like, okay, I'm good. And then another 6 months goes by, and as it gets closer to that day, you start to get anxiety again. And I think once you have cancer, you'll always have cancer. It's always going to be on your shoulder, and it's something that you'll never go back to the way you were.
Um, Rihanna, I mean, you've been a caregiver to your grandfather, so the perspective is a little bit different. And I think all of us who have been in a caregiving position have our own fears for someone else. How did you deal with yours?
So I'm currently still actually dealing with it. Now with the fear of maybe it could be genetically passed down to not only myself, but to other family members as well. So now my family members are getting tested whenever they can to make sure that they're not getting it. But at the same time, my grandmother is now at a high risk of developing lymphoma. And we just found out about this news a few weeks ago. So it's a very scary reoccurrence again, that just losing my grandfather a year ago, that I'm going through the whole same process again. However, this time I feel like my family and I are definitely managing it a lot better. At this time right now, we aren't still, very introduced knowing what lymphoma is all about. We did a little bit more research about what it is. We did get into contact with the doctors and other specialists to help make sure that we get a full understanding of what, that cancer actually is. And right now we're taking it day by day. We're making sure that she's really understanding what this is, what it could potentially lead into, and making sure that we're all staying together to help each other out whenever we need to, and to just take it one day at a time. I think with my grandfather, we were also worried. We always thought, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen next. We always lived in fear. But now, with a potential reoccurrence happening again in the family, we're trying to live in the moment, in the present, just enjoying, like, Ronnie said, those little moments in life, the little moments in life that you couldn't do before, that now you're going to.
Thank you. And I want to close this conversation just with you, Dr. Fitch. At what point should people seek professional help around anxiety? When does fear become more than something that really needs to be dealt with, perhaps on a physical level?
Well, there are a couple of ways of thinking about that. One is the idea that if people are finding they're thinking about it and worried about it, then by all means talk to someone about it. Even if one doesn't think it's interfering with life or daily activities, if you're concerned about it, have the conversation. But I think beyond that, if the fear of recurrence and the emotional reaction is meaning you are maybe not eating or not sleeping, or it's interfering with your ability to concentrate, go to work, or be involved in your daily activities, by all means, I would say talk to somebody, think about what kind of help would be useful.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to move to the next question, and I'm going to say that the question is very, very long, so I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. And based on the nature of the question, it actually can be directed to all of you. The question from one of our audience members is, any tips for how to navigate family and friend conversations with early onset CRC? So this could really be this friend-family conversation around cancer in general. The person who's asked the question goes on to suggest that a lot of people are very well-meaning. You're going to be fine in the conversation, and maybe you don't seem so fine. And the difficulties in navigating some of the assumptions that people make about how you are and what's going to happen. So really the idea here is that, your own experience in navigating personal conversations with friends and family about your situation specifically, how to do that, how you can help other members of your friend and family group help you. So again, Dr. Fitch, if I could start that question with you, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Yes, another important question, another complex one. I think the first thing I'd like to say is that we all come to this kind of experience with a family that has a culture, and by that word I mean we all have ways of talking with one another. We all have ways of interacting and expressing. Same thing with our friends. We're used to a certain type of conversation and a certain way of dealing with things. So I would say my best advice might be learn all you can yourself so that you are in a position of, if you will, control over information. And then if you feel you can be proactive, confront some of the things that people are saying and just say, I don't think you've quite got the right information there. Based on the information I have, this is what the story might be. And I hesitate to use the word confront, but that's part of it. You're pushing back a little bit and in some ways helping people get the right interpretation of what's going on and acknowledge the kinds of things that you're feeling.
No, I like that direction. And I mean, Jody, Ronnie, the idea that you can help people to help you, how did that look in your own experience? Ronnie, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, I know with mine, my diagnosis was really bad because it was, spread in 5 different areas, and I was considered palliative. And when speaking with your family, you don't want them to have the fear. So I know when I spoke with my dad, I gave him the Coles version. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to take chemo and things will get better. Even though you may be scared yourself, sometimes you don't want to have everybody else scared. And you hold back on some of the information that they don't need to know. And I think that has a lot to do with it. You share the information that you think they need to know, because going into too much detail can be actually very overwhelming.
Brianna, how would you add to that comment? I mean, were you in a position where you had to have all of the information, or how did you manage that?
Yes, so going off of what Dr. Fitch said earlier, my family and I, we had to do the research ourselves. We didn't know much about what colorectal cancer was. We got a lot of research from online, from doctors, physicians, and we spoke amongst each other and within our family members when we addressed the news to them that this is what our grandfather has, because our native language is not English, it's Romanian, so it was a little bit harder to translate that information, especially to a little bit of an older population who may not understand, what the diagnosis is now compared to what they think it is. So it was definitely more of a challenge, especially with that language barrier, communicating that information amongst family and friends in terms of his treatment, his care, and then his actual diagnosis.
Yeah. And what were the secrets in making sure you had just an open, wonderful dialogue with friends and family to get to your grandfather the best support possible? Any secrets you want to share?
I think just completely being honest. I know sometimes saying too much can be very overwhelming, but with my family and I, we like to open up to one another and be completely honest. And having each other's backs is really important, and especially being there to support one another because it's overwhelming, getting diagnosed with cancer, especially being a loved one. It can be very overwhelming, but I think coming up front, being completely honest and saying that you each have the support of one another, that no one's going through this alone, that we're going to support each other through this whole journey.
Thank you. I'm going to actually bridge to another question because we're starting to run out of time. And Jody, I'm going to actually direct the question at you. Were there moments when you felt stuck? And how did you actually continue to propel yourself to continue to move forward?
Yes, 1,000%. There were moments I felt stuck and terrified, and that, I was just, the chemo makes you so sick that you don't feel like you're healing and beating the thing at times. So again, for me, I mean, I had a naturopath that specialized in oncological patients, and he only saw oncological patients. And for me, that was a big part of not feeling stuck and moving forward. But more importantly than that, information for me. Like, if the more information I had, the more control I felt like I had over the outcome. And there is only so much you can do. I mean, there are people that do all the same things that I do and don't make it, unfortunately. But having that information felt like more power to me. So when I did feel stuck, I usually just focused on, what don't I know? What else can I do? What am I missing? What can I add into my lifestyle that's going to help me through this time? And whether it was like, and I usually felt more stuck when I was in the absolute depths of despair 3 or 4 days into a chemo treatment, because I was experiencing, 99% of all possible symptoms, even the rare ones, and couldn't get out of bed some days, and couldn't swallow food, and couldn't drink water, and that was when I was like, I'm not winning this war against this beast, but what else can I do? So I listened to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books, and I think I mentioned that earlier. But again, it was all about being knowledgeable, having information, and just feeling like I had a minimal amount of control, at least some control, and that everything in my life wasn't completely out of my control. And that sometimes involved, diet. What else can I put into my diet that is going to fight this and help me heal? So yeah, that's kind of what I did when I felt stuck.
Yeah, well, I think you won the war with all the wonderful things
Winning
you've
right
done.
now.
Yeah, as all of you have. And it's always shocking that we don't have as much time as we'd like to. The many, many questions we have. Just a reminder that Colorectal Cancer Canada aims to provide all of you who've asked answers to that, and they'll get back to you. But in the meantime, thanks to Dr. Fitch, Rihanna, Jody, and Ronnie for spending time with us and for your wonderful contributions today.